The smell of burnt toast was the official scent of my defeat. It clung to the cheap cotton of my worn-out pajamas, a constant, acrid reminder of another morning I had failed to even start correctly. David had already left for work, his condescending note left on the counter next to the blackened bread a testament to his opinion of me. Try not to burn the house down, Zara, not a good morning, not then I love you. Just a casual, dismissive jab that landed with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. For 5 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into the hollow spaces of his life, folding my dreams and my voice into tiny, manageable squares he could easily ignore. I was a ghost in my own home, a silent witness to a life that was happening around me, but never to me. My reflection in the grimy kitchen window showed a woman I barely recognized, a 27-year-old vessel of quiet desperation, her vibrant green dress, a relic from a time she felt alive, now hanging limp in a closet she never opened. The woman in the window had forgotten the taste of her own desires, her spirit eroded by 1,000 tiny compromises until all that remained was the quiet hum of apology for simply existing. He came home that evening with the smell of another woman's perfume clinging to his suit and an unnerving calm in his eyes. He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "Zara," he began, his voice devoid of any emotion, "this isn't working." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, worse than the burnt toast. I want a divorce. I had expected to feel a shattering, a cataclysmic implosion of the fragile world I had built. Instead, there was only a profound, echoing emptiness, a void where my heart should have been. It was the final, inevitable confirmation of my own invisibility. He had erased me so completely that my absence wouldn't even register. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply nodded, the movement feeling disconnected from my body, as if I were a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings. The silence that followed was a physical entity, pressing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of my own insignificance. He saw my compliance not as shock or pain, but as permission, another testament to my weakness. And in that moment, something shifted. A tiny, dormant ember of rage, buried under years of self-doubt and suppression, began to glow. It wasn't a fire, not yet, but it was warmth in the desolate cold of my existence, a flicker of defiance in the face of my complete and utter erasure. The next day, I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I took nothing but my purse and the green dress, a silent promise to myself to find the woman who once wore it. My friend, Aisha, had pleaded with me to stay with her, her voice a lifeline of genuine concern in the sea of my numbness. But I couldn't. I needed to be alone, to drown in the city's anonymity. I ended up in a bar I'd never been to before, a place with dark wood and low lighting that felt like a secret. It was the kind of place David would have called unseemly. The thought brought a bitter smile to my lips. I was drinking something amber that burned my throat when he sat down beside me. I hadn't seen him approach. It was as if he had materialized from the shadows, a solid presence in a world that suddenly felt thin and unreal. He was impeccably dressed, a stark contrast to my own dishevelment, his features sharp and beautiful, his eyes dark and impossibly deep. He moved with a quiet, lethal grace that commanded the attention of the entire room without a single word. The loud chatter of the bar seemed to dim, the patrons unconsciously shifting to give him space. He was a predator, and this was his hunting ground. "You look like you've lost a war," he said, his voice a low, smooth rumble that vibrated through me. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I should have been afraid. A man this powerful, this dangerous, did not simply make conversation with invisible women in dingy bars. But fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. All I had left was the raw, exposed nerve of my heartbreak. I answered, my voice raspy. He ordered me another drink without asking. He didn't speak again for a long time, simply watched me with an unnerving intensity, as if he could see all the broken pieces inside me. He was not just looking at me, he was seeing me, truly seeing me, in a way David never had. His name, I would learn, was Jean Quan, and he was the kind of man myths are written about, a king in his own brutal, opulent world. He was everything my old life wasn't: decisive, powerful, and terrifyingly alive. He didn't offer condolences or empty platitudes. He offered an escape. "Your war is over," he declared, his gaze locking with mine. "Your old life is finished. From now on, you belong to me." It was possessive, arrogant, and utterly insane. And in my brokenness, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. His world was a dizzying kaleidoscope of extremes, a jarring transition from the muted gray of my former life. One moment I was in a cramped, decaying apartment that smelled of damp and regret. The next I was stepping into a penthouse that scraped the sky, a palace of glass and steel overlooking a city that now felt like a toy. The juxtaposition was so stark it gave me vertigo. Jean moved through this opulence with an easy, almost bored familiarity, while I felt like an imposter, a stray plucked from the gutter and placed on a velvet cushion. He gave me clothes, jewels, a life I couldn't have even dreamed of, but his most significant gift was his unwavering attention. His eyes were always on me, a heavy, possessive gaze that stripped away the layers of invisibility I had worn for so long. He saw not the defeated wife, but a queen in waiting, and his belief was so absolute, it started to seep into my own fractured self-perception. But with his protection came a chilling understanding of his power. I saw men, powerful men, bow their heads in his presence, their fear a palpable thing in the air. His word was law, his displeasure a death sentence. It was terrifying, and yet I felt safer than I ever had with David. David's neglect was a slow poison. Jin's world was a roaring fire, dangerous, but undeniably warm. Aisha's worried voice crackled over the phone he had given me, a sleek, untraceable device. "Zara, what are you doing? People are saying this man. They say he's a monster, a part of the Korean Mafia. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a nightmare." I stood on the balcony, the wind whipping through my hair, the city lights a galaxy at my feet. "Maybe I need a nightmare to wake me up," I whispered, the words feeling truer than anything I had said in years. My dialogue with Jean was sparse, punctuated by long, charged silences. He wasn't a man for small talk. His words were actions in themselves. "You will eat," he'd command, and a feast would appear. "You will rest, and the softest bed imaginable would be waiting." One evening, as I stood staring at my reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, he came to stand behind me, his warmth a solid wall at my back. "Who told you that you were worthless?" he asked, his voice soft, yet laced with a cold fury directed at my past. I flinched, the question hitting too close to home. "My husband," I managed to say. He placed a hand on my waist, his touch both a comfort and a brand. "He was a fool," Jean stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And fools pay for their mistakes." The finality in his voice sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of fear and a dark, thrilling sense of vindication. The past had a nasty habit of refusing to stay buried. I was in a small, obscenely expensive boutique, the kind of place where price tags were whispered, not displayed, when I saw him. David. He was standing near the entrance, his face a mask of disbelief and something else, something ugly and possessive. He looked diminished in this world of effortless wealth, his off-the-rack suit a pathetic imitation of the bespoke armor Jean wore. He strode towards me, his face contorting into that familiar, patronizing sneer. "Zara? What on earth are you doing in a place like this? Did you steal a credit card?" The accusation was so typical, so designed to shrink me back into the box he had built for me. A month ago, his words would have shattered me. I would have stammered, apologized, and fled in shame. But the woman who stood before him now was not the same one he had discarded. I was dressed in silk that felt like a second skin, a gift from Jean, and his presence lingered on me like a powerful, protective scent. I lifted my chin, my gaze steady. "I'm shopping, David. What are you doing here? Looking for a new wife to belittle?" His jaw tightened, shock warring with anger in his eyes. He had never heard me use that tone, had never seen this spark of defiance. He reached out, his hand clamping around my arm. Don't you be clever with me. Who is paying for all this? You come with me right now." His grip was weak, pathetic, but the violation of his touch sent a jolt of ice through my veins. Before I could wrench myself away, a shadow fell over us. Gene. He had been waiting in his car, but he must have seen David approach. He moved with a silent, fluid deadliness that was terrifying to behold. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply placed his hand over David's, his grip inexorable. David's face went pale, his eyes widening in genuine fear as he looked at the man who stood before him. Jin's knuckles were white. "You will release her," Jin said, his voice a low, chilling whisper that promised unspeakable violence. "And you will never touch what is mine again." David's hand fell away as if he'd been burned. He stumbled backward, sputtering, a coward stripped of his flimsy bravado. Jin's gaze didn't leave him. "She was never yours to begin with. You were merely a placeholder, an unfortunate mistake. A mistake that I am now going to rectify." He guided me away, his arm a secure band around my waist, leaving David trembling in the middle of the boutique. The confrontation had been short, brutal, and decisive. And as Jean led me out into the sunlight, I felt not fear, but a surge of exhilarating power. The last remnants of David's hold on me had been incinerated in the cold fire of Jin's wrath. The rarefied air of Jin's world was not without its own predators. His protection was a gilded cage, but the bars were there for a reason, to keep the other monsters out. I learned this lesson one rain-slicked night. We were leaving an exclusive restaurant, the kind that had no name on the door, when the attack happened. It was sudden and brutal. A sleek black car screeched to a halt, and men in dark suits emerged, their movements professional and ruthless. They were not common thugs. They moved with the same disciplined lethality as Jin's own guards. This was a direct challenge to his authority. My first instinct was to freeze, the familiar paralysis of fear, a ghost from my old life. But as one of the men lunged towards me, a different instinct took over. The Zara, who would have cowered and waited for the end, was gone. I sidestepped, my heart hammering against my ribs, not in panic, but in a furious, defiant rhythm. Jean was a whirlwind of controlled violence, a beautiful, terrifying force of nature. He moved with an efficiency that was mesmerizing, every strike precise, every movement with purpose. But there were too many of them. A man with a cruel, calculating face and a jagged scar across his eyebrow broke through the fray. He was their leader, his eyes fixated on me with a predatory gleam. He was the rival, the secondary antagonist in this violent opera. His name was Kenji, a name spoken in whispers, a man whose ambition was matched only by his sadism. "Quan," Kenji sneered, his voice a gravelly rasp. "You've grown soft." Hiding behind a woman, he saw me as a weakness, a pawn. Jin's jaw tightened, his focus never wavering from the threat. "She is not my weakness," he snarled, shoving one of his guards in front of me to act as a human shield. "She is the reason you will die tonight." The words were a vow, a pronouncement of fate. Kenji laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He lunged for me again, and this time, his fingers brushed against the sleeve of my dress. A jolt of pure terror, cold and sharp, shot through me. This was real. The danger I had only glimpsed was now here, tangible and deadly. In that split second, Jean moved faster than I thought possible. The metallic glint of steel, a sickening thud, and a strangled gasp from Kenji. Jean stood between us, his suit immaculate save for a single drop of blood on his cheek. He was breathing heavily, his eyes blazing with a fury so intense it was almost beautiful. He had protected me. He had been willing to kill for me. And as I stared at him, at this powerful, ruthless man who had named me his, I realized that I was no longer afraid of the monster. I was afraid of the man who was making me love him. The ride back to the penthouse was a silent, tension-filled blur. My mind was a chaotic symphony of the screech of tires, the glint of steel, and the chilling finality in Jin's eyes as he had dealt with the threat. He hadn't killed Kenji, not there on the street, but he had delivered a message written in blood and pain. Back in the sterile quiet of the marble entryway, the adrenaline began to recede, leaving a tremor in my hands. I expected him to be cold, distant, perhaps angry at the vulnerability the attack had exposed. Instead, he led me to the vast living area, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation, and gently pushed me to sit on the plush sofa. He knelt before me, his movements fluid and deliberate, and took my trembling hands in his. His own were steady and warm, a stark contrast to the violence they had so recently dispensed. He said nothing, his dark eyes searching my face, cataloging every flicker of fear, every shadow of doubt. It was an interrogation without words. I was not just a possession he had protected. I was a person whose reaction he needed to understand. The silence stretched, and in it, I found my voice, no longer the timid whisper of the woman I used to be, but something clearer, stronger. I wasn't scared, I said, the words surprising even myself. A lie, of course, but also a profound truth. Not for myself, his thumb stroked the back of my hand, a gesture of such exquisite gentleness it almost broke me. I was scared for you for the first time. I saw a crack in his formidable armor, a flicker of something raw and vulnerable in his gaze. He had built an empire, commanded armies of men, and faced down death itself, but the thought of my fear for him seemed to unsettle him in a way Kenji's blade never could. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against mine, his breath a warm ghost on my skin. "Zara," he murmured, my name a prayer on his lips. "In my world, fear is a currency. But yours is a debt I can never repay." It was in that moment, surrounded by the cold emblems of his power, that the romance I had only felt in thrilling, dangerous bursts truly began. It wasn't about the penthouse or the clothes. It was about this. The quiet intimacy after the storm. The shared vulnerability in a world that demanded unrelenting strength. He lifted his head, his eyes holding mine, and slowly, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't a kiss of possession or passion, but of reverence. It was a promise, a brand, a sealing of a pact that had been forged in violence and was now being sanctified in a moment of profound, breathtaking tenderness. The days that followed were a study in duality. By day, Jean Quan was the untouchable king of a brutal underworld, his every word in order, his presence radiating an aura of absolute control. But in the quiet hours of the night, in the sanctuary of the penthouse, he was just Jean. He was the man who would trace the lines of my palm as if reading my future, the man who listened with unnerving stillness as I spoke of the small, forgotten dreams of my past. He never offered pity, a sentiment I had come to despise. Instead, he offered a chillingly simple alternative. "That cafe you wanted to open," he said one evening, as we looked out over the glittering city. "Tell me where you want it. I will buy the building." I laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful. "It doesn't work like that, Jean. It was just a silly dream." He turned to me, his expression deadly serious. "Nothing you desire is silly. Your dreams are not trivial. They are commands." This was his language of love, not in whispered sonnets but in grand, decisive, world-altering gestures. He was rewriting my reality, replacing the narrative of worthlessness David had ingrained in me with an epic of infinite possibility. He wanted to give me the world not to own me, but because he genuinely believed the world was my due. I started to question him, not his motives, but the foundation of his conviction. "Why me, Jean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, afraid the answer would shatter the fragile confidence I was building. "You could have anyone. Why a broken woman from a burned-out life?" He pulled me closer, his arm a secure band around my waist, his scent of expensive cologne, and something uniquely him, something like steel and safety, enveloping me. "Because you are not broken," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble against my ear. "You are a queen in exile, waiting for someone to remind you of your throne. The fire that burned your old life down did not destroy you. It forged you." He made me believe it. He made me see the strength in my survival, the resilience in my quiet endurance. My transformation was no longer a passive event happening to me. It was a conscious claiming of the power he saw in me all along. The woman who once felt invisible was now the focal point of the most powerful man in the city. And she was finally, thrillingly, beginning to feel worthy of the view. The fragile peace of our domestic idol was inevitably shattered. Kenji was not a man to accept defeat gracefully. His pride had been wounded, and his ambition was a cancer that needed to metastasize. He couldn't reach Jean directly, not through the layers of security and loyalty that surrounded him, so he sought a different vector of attack. He went after my past. A frantic call from Aisha was the first sign. Her voice was strained with a fear I recognized all too well. Zara, there are men watching my apartment. They followed me from work. They asked about you. They asked about David. My blood ran cold. Kenji had found my pressure points. Aisha, the one person who represented the innocent world I had left behind. And David, the loose thread I had foolishly believed was cut. Jean saw the terror on my face as I ended the call and was by my side in an instant. What is it? I explained, my voice shaking. He's targeting my friend. He's looking for my ex-husband. Jin's face became a mask of cold, controlled fury. The gentle lover was gone, replaced by the ruthless Mafia boss. He has made a fatal error, Jean said, his voice deceptively calm. He has mistaken a line in the sand for a suggestion. He made a single phone call, his Korean words short, sharp, and utterly final. Within the hour, Aisha and her entire family were being relocated, put on a private jet to a secure location so luxurious she would later joke about her kidnapping vacation. The second part of his response was far more chilling. He didn't send men after David. He did something far more insidious, something that showcased the true, terrifying scope of his influence. He simply erased David's life, not by ending it, but by dismantling it, piece by piece, from a distance. David's prestigious job was suddenly terminated due to a restructuring. An audit revealed years of financial indiscretions he had cleverly hidden. The woman he had left me for suddenly found his impending poverty and legal troubles deeply unattractive and vanished. Every pillar of the life he had built on deceit and arrogance was systematically kicked out from under him, leaving him in a state of freefall, a social and financial pariah. Jean explained it to me that night, not with pride, but with a chilling matter-of-factness. A bullet is a mercifully quick end, he said, his gaze fixed on the city below. True punishment is forcing a man to live in the ruins of his own making, to choke on the ashes of his own arrogance. He will now know what it is to be truly invisible. It was a terrifying display of power, a morally ambiguous act of retribution that should have horrified me. But all I felt was a dark, fierce satisfaction. He hadn't just protected me. He had avenged me. Kenji's obsession grew, his attacks becoming more desperate, more personal. He saw my very existence as an insult, a symbol of Jin's supposed weakness that was, in fact, his greatest strength. The final confrontation came not in a hail of bullets, but in a gilded trap. I had agreed to meet Aisha, who was briefly and secretly back in the city, at a designated safe location, a small, private gallery Jean owned. But Kenji's intelligence was good. He had anticipated the move. When I arrived, the gallery was empty, save for him, standing in front of a large, abstract painting, a cruel smile playing on his lips. My security detail was slumped unconscious in the hallway. My heart hammered in my chest, but the paralyzing fear of the past was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating anger. I was no longer a pawn. I was a queen, as Jean had said, and it was time I started acting like one. You wanted my attention, Kenji, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. You have it, he chuckled, circling me like a shark. I wanted the girl who has turned the great Jean Quan into a sentimental fool. I look at you, and I see nothing special. His words were meant to wound, to diminish me, but they no longer had any power. That's because you're not looking, I retorted, remembering Jin's words. You see a liability. He sees an asset. I began to walk around the gallery, my movements slow and deliberate, creating space. buying time. I knew Jean would be coming. He had a tracker on the necklace he had given me, a beautiful diamond teardrop. He was never far. My role was not to fight Kenji, but to survive him until the cavalry arrived. I had to use my intellect. "You think killing me will prove you are stronger than him?" I asked, stopping in front of a sculpture. "It will only prove you are a coward. It will unleash a wrath you cannot possibly comprehend. His empire is built on fear, yes, but his loyalty is built on something you will never understand. Love." The words sounded absurd in this context, but it was true. Kenji lunged, his patience gone. But in that moment, I wasn't the trembling woman from the bar. I was Zara, the woman who had walked out of a burning life and into the arms of a king. I grabbed the base of the small, heavy sculpture and swung it with all my might, connecting with his knee. He roared in pain and surprise, staggering back. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it was enough. The gallery doors burst open, and Jean was there, a figure of pure, righteous fury. He saw me, safe, and then he saw Kenji, and the look in his eyes was the promise of a slow and painful oblivion. The fight was brutally short. Jean didn't just defeat Kenji, he dismantled him, with a cold, precise rage that was terrifying to witness. He was protecting his queen, and in doing so, solidifying his reign. In the aftermath, a profound quiet settled over our lives. Kenji was gone, his organization shattered, and absorbed into Jin's ever-expanding empire. The external threat had been neutralized, leaving only the two of us in the silent opulence of the penthouse. The victory did not feel triumphant, but deeply, fundamentally calming. It was the quiet of a settled score, the peace of a secured border. We stood on the balcony, the night air cool against my skin. I was wearing the green dress, the one I had taken from my old life, now a symbol not of what I had lost, but of the journey I had taken. Jean came to stand behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pulling me back against his solid warmth. We didn't speak for a long time, simply watching the endless river of lights below. The city that had once felt so overwhelming and indifferent now felt like our kingdom. "It's over," I whispered, the words a release. "For now," he corrected gently, his lips brushing against my temple. "This world will always have its monsters." I turned in his arms to face him, my hands coming up to cup his face, my touch now confident and sure. "But they don't scare me anymore. None of them." I looked into the eyes of this dangerous, possessive, and impossibly gentle man who had seen me when I couldn't see myself. He was a hero, a powerful protector whose love was as fierce and uncompromising as his violence. He had not saved me from my life. He had given me the strength to save myself. "You were right," I told him, my voice thick with an emotion that was deeper than gratitude. "You didn't find a broken woman. You found a queen. And I'm never leaving my throne again," he smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his handsome features into something breathtakingly beautiful. "I would never allow it," he murmured, his voice a low, possessive growl that no longer felt like a threat, but like the most profound declaration of love I had ever known. He leaned down and kissed me, a deep, consuming kiss that tasted of forever. The smell of burnt toast was a distant memory, a ghost from another woman's life. My life now smelled of him, of power, of safety, and of a dark, thrilling, and uplifting romance that had been born from the ashes. It was not a fairy tale ending, but it was mine. And it was more than enough.